Hi, welcome to Kev Likes Movies. My name is Kev, and have you ever seen this video?
Detroit police say this was a relatively peaceful event.
This is a clip from a news station in Detroit covering the unveiling of a Baphomet statue at the local satanic temple. They cover the protests, interview a couple supporters, and eventually, they make their way to this guy.
I'm just excited to see my Lord and Savior Baphomet represented in such glorious Italian stone. I do hope his eyes gaze upon me, and that my allegiance is recognized. I don't know. Notice me, senpai! Notice me!
And then they cut to him again.
Part of me wishes that angel statue would come to life, and King Baphomet would rise, and two eternal juggernauts would do battle right here in the middle of the city. But for what is this battle raging, you ask?
Has never before been seen publicly. The Satanic Temple said.
And one final time.
It's like you can't have one without the other, you know? Like I'm equal parts God and the devil. A cloak of shame covers this man, and only supreme light will wash my body clean.
So if you're anything like me, you're probably thinking, who is this weirdo? And why did they give him so much screen time? And if you're a little smarter than me, you've probably already figured out that this video is completely fake. And yeah, it is. The news coverage and the statue are real, but this guy just cut himself into the segment. And he does this a lot.
You're never alone if you're in a line.
Like, a lot.
Much more than captivated, I would say. I was transfixed, enraptured by the dazzling light dancing through the darkened Michigonian sky. I thought perhaps the end of days was upon us, but it turned out it was just a disoriented old lady in a champagne-colored Toyota Avalon. In a flash, I was sent back to the moment where it all began, psychically time-traveling to a gloomy Saturday afternoon in 1988. And just like the loaf, we soared, and just like the loaf, we sang. Like a bat out of hell, I'll be gone when the morning comes.
So let's dig a little deeper and figure out just who this guy is and what his deal is anyway.
Hi, I'm director Andrew Bowser.
This is Andrew Bowser, an actor slash writer slash filmmaker with over 20 years of experience making independent films. He's got a few features under his belt and has even made a few viral comedy videos for Nerdist and Funny or Die. But the thing that he's probably most well known for is his character Onyx the Fortuitous. If you don't know who or what Onyx is, he's basically a parody of the weird dude that you'd run into at a GameStop. The kind of guy who doesn't really know what to do with himself in social situations and ends up talking way too much and making a fool of himself. He's very long-winded and often trails off into these wild monologues that have nothing to do with the topic at hand. And Bowser really seems to have a thing for this specific character trait because a number of his other sketches also include characters that go on and on about nothing.
Are you serious?
As serious as a rendezvous with a rancor. Sure, I get that most guys dug the cuffs and chains, but I just wanted to fraternize with the boss on house. Instead of a leather and gold bikini, I wanted the last princess of Alderaan smothered in a white parka and telling me
you deserve love and bundles of it, a real love.
I can definitely see this kind of character being sort of off-putting for certain people, or at the very least, it's a running joke that has the potential to get pretty old pretty quick. Personally speaking, I fucking love this guy. The monologues are long and super rambly, and sometimes involve this really weird, drawn-out cadence, but they're actually pretty well written overall and are filled with plenty of smaller jokes that often build up to a satisfying payoff, with a catchphrase or two thrown in for good measure.
I don't know. Watch Dogs look pretty cool. Son Goku's pretty cool. Poles are pretty cool. Satan's pretty cool. Rescue Rangers is pretty cool. Arby's is pretty cool. I would much prefer fucking the ghost!
And Bowser has made a ton of these videos, so clearly I'm not the only one who sees something in this character. So when I got word that Andrew Bowser was working on a feature-length Onyx the Fortuitous movie, I just had to be a part of it. So I gathered together a considerable amount of money and essentially became a producer on the project. By which I mean I kicked in about 20 bucks on Kickstarter, which was a considerable amount of money for me at the time. I almost never donate to Kickstarter projects because, you know, I'm chronically broke. But I really believed in this one. I've seen a few of Bowser's short films, and to be honest, they're pretty solid. He's a guy who clearly knows what he's doing, and he's good at it. But even with being a fan of the character and being aware of Bowser's pedigree as a filmmaker, I did retain some skepticism about the project. The Kickstarter video was very promising, pitching the movie as Fright Night meets Ernest Scared Stupid, and I fucking love Ernest Scared Stupid. But as promising as that is, it's still a movie that takes a character that's mostly worked in the context of short-form sketch content and stretches that out over a feature-length runtime, which can totally work and has several times. Going back to Ernest, that character started out in commercials of all things before going on to headline several feature films. But if you've seen as many Saturday Night Live spin-off movies as I have, you know that this is kind of a risky maneuver. Sometimes you get a Wayne's World or a Blues Brothers, but other times you get a Night at the Roxbury or an It's Pat.
What we want to know is, are you a brother or a sister?
I'm an only child.
But I've got faith that this guy can make it happen. So without further ado, let's take a look at this weird little guy in his weird little movie. And maybe we can figure out where my fucking money went along the way.
Friardale Manor. Vartos Estate. Astounding.
It's the kind of house that makes you want to recreate the 1993 Michael Bay directed music video for Meatloaf's I'd Do Anything for Love. I don't know. But I won't do that.
I'm going to try not to spoil too much in this video, but he totally does that. The film opens with our protagonist Marcus J. Trilbury, otherwise known as Onyx the Fortuitous, as he puts together a little audition tape for a contest held by his idol Bartok the Great. The 5 winners of this contest will be invited to Bartok's home estate to take part in a satanic ritual to summon the infernal destroyer Abaddon. So it's kind of like Willy Wonka, except less scary now that I think about it. Once Onyx arrives at Bartok's mansion, we're introduced to Bartok himself, his assistant, and the other 4 contest winners. And this will largely be our cast for the rest of the film. It's very economical in that way. In my video on Girl on the Third Floor from a few years ago, I mentioned that a lot of filmmakers will go this route when creating a feature because it's just a great way to make sure your budget goes as far as possible. You have one big location, only a handful of actors, and plenty of rooms to shoot in so it doesn't get stale. But when you only have so much of a space to work within, you have to make sure that the dialogue and the acting are enough to carry the film. And thankfully, pretty much everyone here does a good job. The material that they're given is intentionally very silly, and the performances in turn have a very campy, over-the-top quality to them. But I think it all builds to that 80s creature feature aesthetic that Bowser was going for. This movie leans pretty heavily on the films that inspired it, and as a result it kind of walks a fine line between that 80s inspired subject matter and the very modern presentation. In the opening scenes of the film you can see things like CRT TVs and computer monitors, and Onyx even records his audition tape on what I assume is a mini DV camcorder instead of something like a phone, which, okay, this is super nitpicky, but Onyx's audition tape is filmed in a 4:3 aspect ratio, but the rest of the film is presented in 21:9, so that part is just window boxed when it shows up on screen, which is just mildly annoying and shows up for less than 2 minutes, but still. I personally would have appreciated if the movie went for more of an 80s look with the cinematography and the way everything's staged, but the production design does help a lot in this regard. It just comes at the cost of making some things feel out of place, like this high school bully that taunts Onyx in the opening scenes of the film. Like, I know Onyx is supposed to be a little pathetic, but come on, that was just weird.
I don't want it to be too hot for my baby mouth.
What an odd thing to say.
The Kickstarter for this movie only raised just over $600,000, which may sound like a life-changing amount of money for you and me, but in terms of feature-length films, that's almost nothing. And even with the cost-saving measures taken here, you can see every cent of that money on screen. This movie looks fucking great. The lighting and the production design are already pretty solid, but the real stars of the show for me are these creature designs done by Adam Doherty and the Creature Kit shop. The fact that this movie went for practical effects in the first place already grants it bonus points for me, but I especially love how cartoonish the puppet designs are here. It almost reminds me of things like Gravity Falls. Like if there were a live-action Gravity Falls short, I would want it to look exactly like this. They might be a little cheesy, but they're cheesy in the exact same way that like Killer Clowns from Outer Space is cheesy, and I think it's just rad as hell. Although I will say that I went into this movie with zero expectations whatsoever, so when the first of these puppets did show up around 50 minutes in, it did kind of catch me off guard. There wasn't all that much leading up to that moment that hinted at those kind of creature effects showing up, but I'm glad they did. It was a fun surprise. If you do end up watching this movie, which I do recommend, first of all, sorry for spoiling that for you, but I recommend picking up the Blu-ray if you can because it's got this awesome featurette about how they made the puppets for the movie. That's right, I paid for this movie twice. So now that we've gotten the general vibe of the movie out of the way, you might be wondering just how Onyx fits into all of this given what I've explained about the character. And honestly, he fits in surprisingly well. He's already kind of a cartoonish personality, so casting him as what is essentially a comic relief, underdog type character in an 80s style flick actually works to the character's strengths in a way that I didn't really expect. This movie is, technically speaking, a YouTuber movie, and historically, YouTuber movies often serve as little more than a vanity project for the YouTuber in question. But Andrew Bowser isn't really a YouTuber in the traditional sense. He's a filmmaker with a YouTube channel and a fluke viral character. So I was pretty interested to see how a character like Onyx would be utilized in a feature film, and a bit surprised to find out that until the latter half, he's not really treated like that important of a character. He's obviously the lead, and his name is on the poster, but up until a certain point, the movie just kinda happens around him. I have to imagine that Bowser wrote it this way to free himself up to actually direct the movie, but it also works to give a character like Onyx some breathing room. Onyx can sometimes come across as pretty verbose in a way that could potentially be kind of grating if left to prattle on for too long, which would only make sense. That's kind of the whole point of the character. He's the weird guy. But here, Onyx is significantly toned down from how he is in those new sketches. And he's more than happy to sit back and let the conversation carry on without him, only speaking up when he has something to add. And we don't even get one of his trademark monologues until close to the end of the movie. It's a nice change of pace, and it's a lot closer to how a character like Onyx would behave in a group setting. But even though Onyx isn't really given that much agency in the opening half of the film, we do spend a good deal of time establishing aspects of the character that his online sketches don't really have time to get into. The film occasionally slows down to give Onyx the chance to settle down a little bit, and it's moments like these that really give Onyx some much needed depth. And it also doesn't hurt that Andrew Bowser really is just a very talented actor. He gives the character a very believable pathos that at times might be a little grating, but can also be really endearing and often relatable. And not only is that a really difficult balance to achieve, but it's that balance that I feel is really at the emotional core of this movie. Onyx often has this tick when he speaks, where he says, "I don't know," very quickly. It's one of his signature catchphrases. And I don't want to spoil too much here, but about halfway through the movie we find out that that tick is the result of something traumatic that happened to Onyx when he was very young. Something that he is led to believe is his fault. And for the rest of the movie, I was expecting some cathartic moment where Onyx realizes that it wasn't his fault, and that he is enough just the way he is. Because I think this movie is largely about Onyx finding acceptance and finding a place where he belongs, which is the impression given by the end of the movie, but personally speaking, I think that should have been more of a moment for him. But maybe that's something that could be explored in a potential sequel. And Andrew, if you ever see this and want to crowdfund another Onyx movie, I promise I'll kick in more than $20 this time. Maybe this time I can get my grubby mitts on that sweet, sweet VHS. The Kickstarter video might have billed it as Fright Night meets Ernest, but I also see this movie as kind of a Willy Wonka meets Tenacious D in the Pick of Destiny. And if that sounds at all like it's your jam like it does to me, then I think you're gonna have a pretty good time with this. This is not a movie for everyone. It's mainly for Andrew himself and people like me who are already fans of the Onyx character. You don't necessarily need to know who Onyx is or even see any of his sketches to appreciate this movie, though it certainly helps. Onyx is a weird character, even outside of the confines of this movie. He's a weird Satanist, a weird gamer, a weird weeaboo, a weird furry, a weird Arby's employee, and your enjoyment of this movie is largely going to be contingent on whether or not you can stand to be around a character like that for an extended period of time. But if you can look past those superficial idiosyncrasies and look at the heart of this movie and this character, I think there's a lot there to relate to and enjoy. So if you're a fan of weird, campy, throwback horror movies like Ernest Scared Stupid, Fright Night, or Killer Clowns from Outer Space, I think this is at least worth a shot, although I guess I'll never know what my $20 paid for. I like to think it went into the craft services for the cast and crew. Hope you enjoy the snacks, everyone. It's my pleasure.
Onyx, how much of that did you drink?